Okay, so this is, like I said, intermediate tips and tricks for using Zoom. And my name's Nicole Carter. I'm a part of the digital curriculum crew, and I also help support literacy for K through 12. My background was teaching for 12 years in the 8th grade language arts class, and before I came over here to Beaverton and started working on the Future Ready team, or with the innovation team with PEP. So this particular, when we kind of talk about the PD for comprehensive distance learning, we've separated it into these 5 buckets with some kind of leading questions to help guide staff as they start thinking about building for this kind of virtual unique environment. So today, I would say we're mostly working in the realm of connect and engage, and also could be teach. So we're fitting kind of into all 3 buckets there. And I think as we get into the advanced session, we'll actually start going into the check and respond category, just based on using additional pieces within Zoom to kind of teach from. As you know, we should be thinking constantly about equity as we're building any of these pieces. And, you know, there's been some interesting things coming up in terms of like accessibility. So I will be showing you in some of the controls some different things that actually Zoom is giving you access to. And yeah, we're just constantly aware of it. So as we get started, one thing to be aware of is that we all now have pro accounts for Zoom. If you are not showing up with some of the features that I will be going through today, and it's a little bit hard, I have to preface this, it's a little bit hard to show and demo things in Zoom while you are on a Zoom. So I am going to have to really rely on some of my screenshots, because when I turn on my share screen with you guys, it automatically removes a lot of my controls that I see as the host. And so I really have to rely on screenshots. So I would really recommend, if at all possible, get a buddy. Having more than one person in the room is always helpful, but get a buddy and just open up a Zoom room and just start pressing all of the buttons that I kind of go over today. The more you get comfortable and familiar with things, the more control I think you feel like you have, and it just becomes a little bit more second nature. So some of the things I'm going to be talking about today might not be showing up for you right now on your screen because A, you're not the host, or B, you haven't necessarily signed into the pro account yet. So if you haven't seen some of the features that I will go over today, like polling and the security button, then you might want to make sure that you sign in with the SSO account instead of clicking in with Google, as you may have done in the past. So if you go ahead and just sign in with that SSO, tell it this company domain name with the Beaverton K-12 piece, and then just sign in regular, then that should get you into the pro features. So give that a try when you're off today's Zoom, or if you're watching the video, go ahead and try it now. But that could be one of the reasons why you're not seeing some of the features that I'm going to go over today. Okay, so to start with, I think getting really comfortable with your bottom row of navigation and control will be really helpful. I turn on, and I will go through and show you some of my settings so that you can kind of see some of the things that I actually see. But I definitely go in and mute myself and make my video turn off when I enter a room in my settings, just because simply I might open a room like I did today at least 10 to 15 minutes before my meeting actually starts. And I just don't need people seeing me kind of get my area together. So I just go ahead and turn that off in my settings. So my default is that my audio is off and my video is off as I start a session. And then the other thing to think about too is that if you are having audio problems and or visual problems where your video is cutting out or freezing on you, if your video is not necessarily needed, then go ahead and keep your video off, because that's actually pulling from your bandwidth from your internet, and it will slow everything down, including your audio. So if you're noticing that any of your staff might be giving you, messages in the comments about, I can't hear you, or you're going in and out, that would be the first step. Turn your video off. And then I think the other thing too is, if you don't need to see their faces, then making sure to interact and engage, and I'll show you some of these pieces as well, but interact and engage with the chat and with the kind of participation features, not just the, and I'll show you in a minute, but not just the reaction button, but also using the actual participation features, which if you haven't already, click on participants, and then also open up your chat, because I will ask you to go ahead and drop some things in there as we kind of keep going. But that I think that's helpful. And for our teachers with littles, I'm going to be running a session next week all about how to use Zoom while teaching littles. And I think there needs to be a lot of direct instruction and slow rollout of usage of Zoom and these different participation features, especially for littles. If teachers can print out like some little cards that show the microphone image or the video image, and they can kind of hold those cards up and start training kids. When I hold this up, I want you to turn your mics off. Or when I hold this one up, you know, I want you to turn your mics on. I think as you get the kids used to those kinds of routines, it's just like in the classroom, we would do those routines anyways, but in Zoom, the routines are slightly different. So training the kids how to use all of these buttons and features is going to be incredibly important too. And the only way teachers and we feel comfortable with that is by playing around with them as well. Okay, so continuing to move on. Next to the mute and start video button, when you are the host, you also have the security feature. So at any time, you can turn things on or off. When there is a check mark next to it, then that means it is turned on. So at any time, depending on what you're doing within your staff meeting, you can turn on the share screen feature, meaning that anyone that is in the room in the staff meeting with you can share their screen and explain what they're seeing or what they're doing. And then of course you can turn that off as well. So, and the other thing too is to get the, what you're seeing on the screen where it says rename themselves, that's another participation feature. And in fact, I might go ahead and have you guys do that in a little bit. But you have to turn that on in your settings first in order for that to even be available for the people in your Zoom session to do. And we have found that we've done that quite often, right? Where we ask people to go ahead and rename themselves with their pronouns, or sometimes people log into a Zoom session using someone else's account. And then we're like, who is this, you know, random person in our staff meeting? And, you know, by giving them access to rename themselves, then they can go in and change that when they're already in the Zoom. They don't have to leave and come back. So you've got that ability. Now in the lock meeting, that just means you've locked the meeting. No one can now come in or out. Like you've locked it, and there's like no changing it at that point until you unlock it. So the security button becomes incredibly helpful. You just have to know it's there. And again, you see it when you are the host. Okay, so in the participant and chat window, I just make sure as soon as I open up Zoom that I open those up. Now, every time I go to share screen, sometimes those then disappear. And you also have this feature where you can bump the chat window out on its own separate window so that it's not attached to the gallery view that you see with everyone's faces. I always call it the Brady Bunch view. So you just have to make sure that you know where your kind of floating controls are once you share the screen. And I just would recommend to always open those back up as soon as you share a screen if they do disappear on you, because you have the ability at that point to potentially mute someone or turn their video off at any time from the participant's view screen. So there's been many a times where someone will come into a meeting and, you know, there's a lot of loud background noise or something happening. And from that participation screen, you can easily mute anyone that might be causing a racket in the background. So having that participation screen becomes incredibly important. Essentially too, right at the bottom, so that's what the little pink square shows you, that's where you can just turn someone's video camera and microphone off and on at any time. Additionally, I have these participation buttons. So if you have the participation screen open, can you go ahead and click the Go Faster button for me? Awesome. Now, again, this is where I wish I could show you my screen, but when I do share that screen view with you, the participants window actually is invisible to participants. So from my view, and this is something, again, you can kind of practice, but I now see, I think it's for like about 2 to 3 minutes, but I see the little Go Faster icon next to everyone's name, where it has the microphone and video icon as well. So I can see what everyone has answered. And then I also get a little tally or vote number above the Go Faster button. So I can see that 9 people have actually found the button and pressed it for me. So why don't you go ahead in the participation actions again, can you click on the More button and find the coffee cup for me? Excellent. I see everybody kind of participating for me. So whatever button you now press, it then changes to that icon on my screen. So I can see that I still have 1 person that hasn't pressed the coffee mug yet, but I have 11 people that have. So it just kind of is another way to show teachers how to kind of instigate something, a part of engagement with their kids. Now, again, if you have never seen these buttons before, you have to actually turn it on in your settings in order to get all of these participation buttons. So I will show you that in just a minute. Don't fret, I will show you how to get there. Additionally, underneath those buttons, I have the invites button, the mute all, and the unmute, and then the more button. So at any time, if you feel like, oh gosh, there's so much background noise and I just don't have the time to go through all 40 of my participants and find the person that's being loud, then just hit that mute all button and problem solved. Right? So sometimes when you have super, super large gatherings, it's going to be hard for you to figure out exactly who it is. So you can go ahead and just do that mute all. Additionally, if you want some sort of large chorus answer, you can unmute everyone at the same time as well. So all those buttons, I think, become incredibly important. Now, the more button, let's see if I have a picture of it. I'm not quite sure if I do. I don't. So the more button actually allows you to turn on and off some of the features that you've maybe set up in the settings section. So for instance, I can allow you to mute and unmute yourself. I can allow you to rename yourself from this more option. So as long as I have those settings kind of toggled on in my settings, then I can also like use them here. So it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not like you have to set it up in your settings ahead of time before the staff meeting and then you never can change anything. You actually have a lot of control even once you launch the Zoom meeting to change a lot of these features. And so it's just right there within that more down arrow. Okay, so then the chat window box, like I said before, you can minimize the chat window if you're not utilizing it and it's just taking up screen space, and then you can also pop it out. So my personal setup that I have right now is I do have 2 monitors running, which if you can make that happen, I would highly recommend. It makes running a Zoom meeting so much easier. So on my main screen of my laptop, which is where my webcam is located, that's where I have the Zoom kind of Brady Bunch screen. And then I also have the participants and the chat window, but I have them as separate boxes, separate dialogue or window boxes. And then on my larger monitor is where I then have, you know, the presentation screen that I'm presenting from, and maybe even my actual slide deck that has like speaker notes and stuff like that on it. So I think the reason that I mentally make that decision is because if I'm constantly staring at my second monitor, I am now not looking at my webcam, right? So by being able to come back to you guys and see the participation in the chat window, then it looks like I'm connecting with you more than staring off into my secondary screen, if that makes sense. But it does really help to have more just surface area to see all of the windows and programs that you are potentially running. And like I said, it's helpful for me to be able to move that chat window around. So I actually do utilize that pop out feature. And again, you have the ability to say who can chat with who. So I think in staff meetings, when working with adults, allowing people to chat with the host individually and then also publicly in the main channel is super important. But I think if I were in the classroom, am I even running the chat? or if I am running the chat, I'm probably only allowing them to, you know, publicly. I don't want them to be able to chat individually with people in the Zoom room, right? So you have the decision to decide who talks to who, and you can change that again once you launch the Zoom. It doesn't have to stay stagnant based on your settings. I'm actually going to come back to this share screen because there's really a lot here that we can dive into, especially if you have an iPad, an admin iPad. And we're going to talk about how to access some of those things, as well as if you were here when I first started, I'll share how I do my waiting room with the music. I like using music. I feel like it sets a good tone. So I'm coming back to this, never fear. Okay, so now with our pro accounts, we have access to polling. And again, I think this is a great way for us to engage our audience. If it's not showing up in your controls right now, just remember, like what I said before, you need to sign in from the front with the SSO option to access the pro account features. So when you hit polling, there's a couple of things to think about here. You can do it live in the moment, but there's a couple of steps, and it can really slow your delivery. So if you can, ahead of time, you can set up and think about your polling questions and do it in your meeting setup, like when you're scheduling your meeting in the zoom.us website platform, right? You can create the poll there instead of doing it on the fly. And I'll kind of show you what I mean by that. So when you want to launch a poll, what you're going to do is hit that polling button, and then you're going to get this pop-up window where it's gonna say, do you want to add a question? Now, as you can see, I've just said, yes, I want to add a question, but it opened up a new tab for me because I did not create this ahead of time. So I can go ahead and say, maybe I'm gonna do admin iPad. And then my question is, do you have access to an iPad? And then yes, no, yes, but it is locked in my office. Or even maybe I can do, I have a personal iPad. Okay, so then I can add more questions if I want to, but right now I'm just gonna go ahead and say save. Okay, so now I've added, so this is the meeting interface. You guys can kind of see that. This is the meeting interface. And down here, it now shows that I have one poll question. So I could have done that ahead of time and created it and I can add more questions at any time, but it's here in the meeting information, right? Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll for you, and I'll switch back to my other screen so you can actually see kind of what I'm seeing, but you can also go ahead and enter the information for the poll. Okay, so I'm seeing this with just a slight differentiation because it says admin iPad instead of teacher iPad, but similar question. And so I get a counter at the top that's showing me how long I've launched this poll. At this point, it's about 30 seconds I've launched it. And then I, at any time, can click that red button at the bottom that says end poll, which I will do now. And then, I don't know if I've taken, oh, I didn't take a picture of that, so I should take a picture so I can add it to the slide deck later. I tried to share this live when we did this with the teachers, and again, none of these windows actually show. You have to get really meta when you're doing Zoom stuff, right? Okay, so is thumbs up, can you give me a reaction? I'm gonna ask you to use your actual reaction buttons down in the bottom. Can you give me a reaction if you are now seeing the results? Perfect, thank you, Annie, thank you, Tracy, thank you, Carrie, awesome. Okay, so I'm sharing the results. It looks like 80% of you have an iPad. So then I also get, just like the screen you're seeing right now, instead of end poll, it now says stop sharing. So I will go ahead and click that. I might take a picture of that too, and I'll add it to the deck so you guys can see that also. Okay. All right, so I can relaunch that poll at any time. I get a button at the bottom too that says that I can relaunch, but I'm just gonna close out of it now. So there you go. You've got access to these little polling features. I'm going to show you in the advanced session later today. I'm going to show you some other options too. I mean, the polling feature in Zoom is pretty cool, but there's lots of options that you can use. that we'll kind of go through. So in the recording, you can start recording at any time. There is a button in your settings where you can just automatically start recording as soon as you launch your Zoom. And I do not turn that on. And that's simply because, quite frankly, I go in and open the Zoom room 10, like I said, 10 to 15 minutes before the room is, or before the meeting launches. And so then that's an extra 10 to 15 minutes that it's recording that I don't really need. And so I just go ahead and make sure as a part of my workflow that I turn recording on when I'm ready for it. And you can pause the recording at any time. I think sometimes we don't utilize the pause share and the pause recording feature as often as we actually should. Okay, so as I said before, I've already kind of asked you to give me some reactions. We've used both the participation reactions, and then I just asked you to give me a thumbs up a minute ago with the reactions, so that's good. And I think we need to teach teachers how to do that, and I think we need to teach the students how to do that. That's a nice, easy way to keep them kind of engaged with what we're doing. And then in our advanced session, we're going to really talk about breakout rooms. And I'm going to have you go into a breakout room and utilize some tools so that it's not just, I'm going to shove you into a room and we're going to, talk about a, topic. I'm going to actually make you do something. Something to think about as I've done this session with our teachers, many of them, when I pushed them into a breakout room, had never been in a breakout room before. They had neither used it in the classroom and they hadn't been in a meeting where a breakout room was utilized. So I think giving them access to the breakout room in a staff meeting so they can see the possibilities, I think might be a really good idea. With the caveat that we talk about some of the concerns with breakout rooms as well, which I will get to. Okay, now in terms of closed captioning, so this isn't something where it just automatically registers what you're saying. Like there are programs out there that do that, like Apple Clips, for example, registers what you're saying and will do like a live closed caption. This program doesn't do that. You actually have to physically type it in. So you could have a secretary maybe taking notes and doing closed captioning as you're talking, or you can be typing it out, but it's not something that it automatically does for you. So you can assign someone to do the closed captioning for you, or you can do it yourself. And then additionally, we're gonna keep going. I'm getting a little bit of slowdown here. Okay, so now I wanted us to look at the renaming feature and play around with your actual view. So this isn't something I can necessarily show you. I just want you to play around with some of the buttons up at the top right-hand side. So the first one, I want you to find where it says speaker view and just toggle back and forth from speaker to gallery for me. We all have our own personal view. I think I prefer gallery view. I don't need my big old face distracting me, which is what speaker view is. So I typically will do the gallery view so I can see as many people as possible. And then I want you to go ahead and click on the jelly beans over your face or your initials. And next to where it says mute, click on those jelly beans and then go ahead and rename yourself. Why don't you go ahead and rename yourself, adding in your school? What building are you at? And I'll just give you a minute to do that. Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Awesome, Carrie. Thank you. So again, these, I mean, I know these are kind of like weird little things, but I think doing this in a staff meeting and showing teachers the ability to do it, I think is a good idea. Again, another option for engagement. Okay, I think that's all I really wanted to show on that screen. Oh, okay. So additionally, I think the thing here is if you have a large staff meeting happening, I would definitely recommend that you potentially have a co-host, whether that's your secretary or another staff member. But just like with Jen in the room with me, she's watching the chat and she's there to like answer questions or to like stop me at any time and say, hey, like we can't hear you right now or whatever. I think just having a co-pilot, that's what we've been calling it, having a co-pilot is incredibly helpful. And from either the participants window or from their image, you can clearly make someone a co-host. So when I have a co-pilot, they are my co-host. I make them a co-host. And from this window, you also see that people have the ability to ask, like if you've locked down their video, they have the ability to say, hey, can I actually turn my video back on? So there's a couple of pieces there that I think just having teachers click on it and having students click on it to know what they have available is good. Okay, I'm gonna jump into my settings and just kind of go over a few of my settings. And if you wanna go ahead and on your computer, open up Zoom and sign in and go to your settings, and then you can kind of toggle things on and off based on what you're seeing on my screen, if that sounds okay. And I am already logged in, so I'm gonna go into my settings. And I think, okay. So one thing, if you're gonna run through this with your staff, I would really recommend when you're sharing a screen, you get these like floating controls that you can actually move all around your screen. And on one end, there is a pause share button. So think about your projectors. If you've ever used the pause button on your projector, I used to use that all the time. It's the same kind of feature in Zoom. When you're signing in to Zoom here, it oftentimes will go into like your personal account profile settings, and we just don't want to necessarily blast that out to everyone and share that. So I just will sometimes pause my share and then get to the correct spot and then unpause my share so that people can see where I'm at without, you know, sharing personal information. Okay, so at the top of my settings, I do not turn on the waiting room. Now, when I utilize a waiting room, I actually just create that slide. It's the first slide in my deck. For those of you that are actually in the slide deck that I gave to you, you will see that the waiting room is the first slide. And, you know, I include some of my information. If I was doing this in a staff meeting, I might mention, hey, you guys need to have, you know, this open, or get a pen and a piece of paper, or whatever they might need. I would put that on my waiting room slide. I include that little clock timer countdown. And then, like I said, I like to share music. And so if I was utilizing the waiting room through the Zoom feature, instead of all of that, it's a stagnant image that you preload. And then it forces you to, like, you know, admit people in. So I will say this, I have been to so many meetings where I'm just sitting there waiting for someone to let me in, and I could sit there and wait for 5 to 10 minutes and not be admitted. So I hate I don't want to make someone feel that way. And so I don't actually utilize that kind of admittance waiting room. And then I don't use the waiting room here either. So I have that turned off. Now we can't change the password settings. That's just on there. And then there's a couple of ones on here that I want to make sure to showcase. Okay, so in the scheduled meeting, so like I said, I turn the host video off when I start the meeting, and I actually turn your videos off too. So I have those both toggled. And then I don't necessarily like people to be able to join or go into before I launch the meeting. And then I do have the chat window turned on, and I have the private chat turned on. If I was a classroom teacher, I probably wouldn't have that on. And then I actually do have sound on that only the host and co-host can hear, so that I know when someone enters the room and I know when someone leaves the room. Just so that, you know, if I all of a sudden get a mass exodus, then I know that I've, you know, like hit a time limit or something. But at one point I had it on for everyone, and a lot of people were like, what is that doorbell ringing? I hate it. So now it's just in my ears and my co-host ears. And then I do allow to enable a co-host. That means once the Zoom meeting is going, I can add a co-host at any time. I have my polling turned on, so that's going to be important. I do have my control bar showing. And I'm trying to think, there's another one I want to make sure that I show. I do have annotation turned on, but you might not want to have that turned on. That's up to you. I do have the whiteboard turned on. And this nonverbal feedback, that is the participation parts where I had you click the go faster, go slower, click the coffee mug, those things. That's that one right there, that nonverbal feedback. I do have meeting reactions, so that's your thumbs up and clapping. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to make sure I turned on or showed you. I think that's probably it. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts on that, Jen, that I need to show? Because we're running out of time. We've kind of gone over, but I do want to make sure I get to this really quickly. So in terms of like sharing your screen, one of the tricks that I use is I actually take my Google slide deck and I present it from published to the web, so that I am not loading all of the editing tools and features and speaker notes. And you know, the fact right now that this slide deck that I'm actually using, there's like 6 of you in it right now. If I were loading it from the regular version, I'm loading all of those editing tools, and all of you in that will also slow it down. And so this just helps me have like a seamless presentation. So to do that, I just go into File and I go to Publish to Web, click the word publish. It pops up with this other annoying box. I have to click OK. And then the link there is what I end up using. And I put that in the slide deck speaker notes. So if you're on like any of the first 3 slides, you'll see that it has the publish to web link, and it also has the view only slide deck. It's in the speaker notes. And then I also end up putting that in my Microsoft Outlook appointment, so that here's another tip. I actually shut my computer completely down before I run a training like this and restart it. And then I just go to my Outlook appointments and open up my as needed windows and run from there. And I don't have anything else running other than like Spotify. I don't have anything else running. It's just these 2 windows with my information. So that helps with kind of, again, using a more seamless option. So once I do that, I open the publish to web version in its own window. That's the only thing that's in it. And then when I go into the share screen, I find that specific window, and that's what I'm running my share screen from. And then for that music option and music in the waiting room, and if you're going to be sharing any videos, so I think back to like the equity meeting that we had last week and the videos and the issues that we had with some of the audio on that, if you make sure to check when you go to share screen, these 2 small little boxes in the bottom left-hand corner, then you're going to get a much better audio experience for your participants. And then I think this is the last one I'm going to go to as we kind of end this particular training. But I really like the idea of sharing music that students or staff like gives you hints. Oh, I love Journey. Let's start a meeting with Journey or whatever, right? So I've given you access to that. It's here in the Spotify link. So if you're interested in maybe creating your own playlist with music that is recommended by the teachers, then do that, or even showing that to your staff and saying, hey, why don't you let your students help you pick some music? But I like leading with a waiting room that has the music. But those 2 boxes are incredibly important for the audio of a Zoom meeting. Okay. I'm feeling like I'm trying to figure out, I feel like I'm getting to the end here, so maybe I'll just continue here. So this is still sharing your screen. So if you have your own iPad, all you need is your iPad and your charging cable. So exactly what you would use to power it up. You're going to take that, plug it into your iPad, and plug it into your laptop, you know, with the USB piece. And then when you launch your Zoom, you're going to click on the share screen, and then you're going to, uh-oh, do I still have everyone? I'm getting a weird, hopefully we're still okay here. Okay. Anyways, you're going to click the iPad via cable. So you do have an option that is an iPad via AirPlay, but that's going to cause you issues. So stick with the cable version, and then you can annotate over articles that you've maybe shared with your staff. You can use like a document camera / whiteboard and use a stylus instead of your trackpad on your laptop. So all of that becomes incredibly important and helpful when you're kind of launching a staff meeting. So again, if you are using an article with your staff or something, I would really recommend practicing ahead of time, but get your admin iPad out, attach it with your charge cord, and use that as your annotation and marking up tool. And it couldn't be easier, and especially with that charging cable, but it's going to help you with a more smooth, seamless Zoom experience. Okay? All right.